Continuing to ask the question to the XtremeAg guys, what's one thing you're changing in 2025 and why? That's what we're covering with Kelly Garrett in this episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I've been asking the question to the XtremeAg guys, what's one or two things you're changing in 2025 and why are you doing it? Because we love to give new ideas to you, the listener and follower of XtremeAg. Kelly's doing something pretty radical. He's going to put in a bunch of cover crops, but he's going to do it while the corn is actually growing pretty early in the season, probably June. Why is he doing this? He's going to tell you. He's joined by TJ Kartes. TJ is the regional representative for a company called Butte Ag. Butte Ag is a cover crop seed company. Their seed is grown mostly in Oregon and then distributed all over. TJ, interesting enough, covers a whole bunch of states in the northern plains, northern upper Midwest, where you're probably saying, yeah, you can't put cover crops here because you know what? They just won't get growing in time, blah, 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 blah. The story we've all heard. Well, guess what? He's going to tell you why you're wrong. All right, Kelly, you're putting cover crops in. You're going to do it in corn. You're going to mostly have corn. You're not going to plant almost any soybeans, and you want to do cover crop. Can't wait until the corn comes off because it's going to be November, won't get enough coverage. You've got a bunch of reasons for doing this. Tell me how you're going to make it work.
So we're going to put them in June, Damian, and there are several reasons. You know, the sustainability part of it, the conservation part, the weed suppression, moisture retention. You know, a lot of farmers, and myself included, we've always wanted clean fields, wanted them to be spotless. We just had the one crop out there, the monocrop of corn. But if you look at the Gabe Brown things that we've looked at before and discussed, Gabe talks about multi-species don't compete, they collaborate. And some of the work I did with TJ last year in the intensive rotational grazing, we dug up the soil, we looked at it, things like that. I now 100% believe in that collaboration. So agronomically, it's for water holding potential. Sustainably, it's for the conservation, the erosion control of it, the carbon sequestration of it. And the third reason, of course, with my cow herd, when the corn comes off, there'll be a tremendous amount of feed out there. So there's many reasons to do this. And I'm excited about it. We've done cover crops early on when the corn's still standing, but we waited until tassel time to do it. Now we're moving it ahead to June to try to accelerate the process.
All right, so we're going to come back to each one of those. TJ, I want you to address something. So reasons for doing this, obviously the erosion control, especially where the hills are. Kelly farms a lot of fields that legit have 25 to 40% slope. Carbon sequestration, so you can then qualify for programs, sustainability programs that might pay as much as $30 to $50 per acre. Forage, because he has livestock, water retention. We're going to then do that. We're also talking about how it works. First thing that the cynic that's listening to this is saying, the skeptic, I should say, is saying, hey, TJ, that's really neat. That might work for him, but it won't work here. You made that joke before you get going. That's the first thing. You even made the crack before hit record button. In agronomy classes at university, you didn't take the two class, the too wet, too cold, this, that, whatever. That's the first thing the skeptics address that. Then we're going to get into all those objectives.
Absolutely, Damon. So that becomes part of my world. So I live in southern Minnesota. So I'm up here in the tundra, cold as hell this morning out here when you get up in the morning. But we realize that we have a shorter season to work with. And it's not just the temperatures, it's the sunlight. We start to lose sunlight. So if we want to establish cover crops earlier in the season, we need to do this V2, V3 seeding in the corn. So what I tell guys is, yes, we are farther north, but we pick the correct species to collaborate and work with your crop, not compete with your crop. So we use like an annual ryegrass or bounty annual ryegrass. We use Bayou kale, purple top turnips, African cabbage, 3 brassicas, and an annual ryegrass, not a cereal rye. So the reason is during the summer, this will go dormant on us at 85, 90 degrees, and in the winter or fall, it opens back up and grows. So in Kelly's case, he's going to get terrific forage out of it. In everybody else's case, you establish this cover crop in a time frame where you armor the soil, keep it cooler in the summer, help with water retention, you're scavenging some nutrients, you're converting these nutrients over to a usable form for your plants. Brassicas will not compete with your corn crop. They're a rooting crop. They're fine. They're not like a dandelion that's going to hurt your crop. So the ones we pick will not hurt your crop. Then in the fall, they're there already for you. So that whole growing season, the fall that we're trying to establish this stuff late, this is already there. It's already growing. So once the canopy opens, it takes off growing.
TJ, the person that's going to say, well, that doesn't work, so I'm too far north. Kelly referenced Gabe Brown. If you're listening to this, Gabe Brown is sort of a pioneer in regenerative agriculture. He wrote a book called Dirt to Soil. I've had him on my Business of Agriculture show. Kelly has kept up with some of the lessons from him. Gabe is near Bismarck, North Dakota, and uses cover crops effectively. So that's one of his lead-off statements, if you've seen him speak, and I have. Yeah, this whole thing that is too cold, I can't get it. He's in Bismarck, North Dakota, and makes cover crops work. So clearly it does work. Kelly, about the objectives, we're going to get back to the objectives real quickly, though, and then we're going to talk about the how-tos. Is this cover crop going to stay all winter? You're going to forward. You're going to either graze it or you're going to chop it off. So does it grow back? In other words, does this accomplish the objective of giving, as Gabe talks about, cover? Shelter, I guess it is, or shield, armor.
No, that it depends on the fall, depends on the cow pressure, things like that. But yeah, it'll stay there all fall. There will be some remnants of it there. I don't believe that the cows will eat it into the ground at all.
So your plan is on this, you're going to graze it off, not chop it off.
Right. This won't be for chopping. This will be for grazing.
Okay. And so you're going to graze it off, but yeah, there's no way it's going to be grazed down to death. So there'll still be some living stuff going into hard winter.
Right.
Okay. All right. The objectives. I think they're all equally important. Erosion control, and somebody says, well, I've got flat ground. That's not an issue. Carbon sequestration, that's big because it'd say, well, I'm going through the person that's questioning this, TJ, say, well, I got flat ground. I don't need to worry about that. Your response to them would be?
I drive around my area right now with flat ground, and there's black dirt in the ditch. So wind blows soil off the landscape also. So if there's a living cover crop there, even if it died now, it's still clinging that soil together, so it prevents wind erosion. Terrible washing erosion, which you get on flat ground. So I've heard that many times, Damian. I have flat ground and won't erode. And I drive by your farm and there's dirt in the ditch. Well, how did it get there? You didn't blow it over there. Mother Nature put it over there. If you stop it in the field, it stays in the field.
Fall tillage. If you drive in the Red River Valley there between Fargo all the way up, you'll see tons of, what's it called when the snow and the soil are blowing together? Snert. Which, yes. By the way, trivia question if you ever want to know, Hagar the Horrible, the comic book character's dog, was named Snert. There you go.
Excellent one.
All right, so then answer the question. I said, okay, carbon sequestration. Kelly, somebody that's going to be skeptical is going to say, I don't need to do that because I don't have a sustainability program, so why do I care whether there's carbon sequestration? I don't get that $40 from Truterra or whoever. And your response is going to be?
Carbon is our most important nutrient. Most farmers don't understand that or realize that perspective because no ag retail can sell it to them. But carbon is your most important nutrient. Your corn stalk is comprised 45% carbon, 45% oxygen, 6.6% hydrogen, and all of the NP and K that we always talk about is a whole 3.4% of what's in there. Carbon is the most important nutrient we have, and you need to get as much in the soil as possible. Those are the agronomic reasons.
3.5 years ago, had him on my Business of Agriculture show because he was on the Wall Street Journal cover feature story about selling carbon credits. And he said then, no ag retailer wants to tell you about the importance of carbon in your soil because no ag retailer makes money selling carbon. 3.5 years later, he's still preaching it. And guess what? You needed to hear it again. So I'm glad that's why I brought it up. Staying with you, Kelly. Forage. The person that's listening to this is going to say, you know what? I don't have cattle. I don't need forage. So therefore, I don't need cover crops. And I already know where this is going, but I want you to say it. Why do I still care?
You still care because of the conservation, the erosion control, which is conservation, the agronomics reasons of getting the carbon in the soil, cycling those nutrients, things like that. The cattle forage is really just a bonus. I believe you should do it. The conservation and the cycling of the nutrients, things like that, the getting the carbon down there, the cattle, it's just free cattle feed.
Yeah, I would say, and TJ, I want you to kick in here. You're the agronomist and the expert. If I don't harvest the forage or harvest it with four-legged animals, it's still a crop that benefits my soil.
Absolutely, 100%. So Kelly hit on it. Carbon. So your corn crop, even in the upper Midwest, the far north, by September, it's done growing. It's flushing all the potassium out of its system. It's done growing. From September to whenever we completely freeze up and stop growing, you could have 30, 50, 60 days of growing season that you're harvesting sunlight and plowing carbon into the soil. You're constantly feeding those microbes, and that's what's going to feed your crop next year. Your mineralizing nutrients are scavenging and holding nutrients. So if you applied, just use a number, 150 pounds of N, and you used 110 pounds of N, there's 40 pounds of N out there. This crop's going to suck that up, hold on to it, and give it back to your crop next year. So all those aspects are why we apply a cover early. If you just do the fall in the upper Midwest, you get part of this, but you don't get this full benefit of this early interseeding.
I want to then talk about, by the way, I want to get a little bit more into the mineralization and the fertility, because there's going to be somebody that says those forage crops, those cover crops, use up my fertility. And I want you to address that. Before I do, speaking of fertility, I want to talk about Nature's. Nature's is one of our business partners here at Extreme Ag. We love those people. Great folks. If you're hearing this before Commodity Classic, make sure you swing by the Nature's booth. We're all going to be there doing 2 different panels on 2 different days. We always have a lot of fun there, so go check us out. We'll make sure we even play trivia games. Maybe I'll ask the question, what is Hagar the Horrible's dog's name, named after the concept of erosion meets snow? And if you answer that question, I'll pull money out of my pocket and give it to you. Nature's is focused on providing sustainable farming solutions and helping maintain your entire crop genetics potential for today and for future generations. We're talking about high-quality fertilizers powered by Nature's Bio-K. They can target specific periods of influence throughout the growing season via precision placement techniques as a means to mitigate plant stress, enhance crop yield, and most importantly, boost your farm's ROI. Go to natures.com to learn more, and also, again, come and see us at Commodity Classic. Part of the time, we're going to be at the Nature's booth. Answer that question, Mr. Agronomist, TJ Kartes. Those cover crops use up my fertility. No, it actually cycles fertility. Am I right?
Right. So the part of the reason we pick the species we pick is the ryegrass during the growing season will go almost dormant. It's not doing anything. We found out that annual ryegrass, not cereal rye, is a good cousin of corn. They're the cousins that actually play nice. Cereal rye and corn beat the snot out of each other because they're both grain crops trying to take up all the nutrients to produce a seed head. Annual ryegrass is not doing that. The brassicas, yes, they are scavenging nutrients. They're a tuber plant, but the thing we're looking at now is they're really trying to release calcium out of the soil. We've done root pits in interseeding like this and found corn plants wrapped around brassica roots, and the brassica roots were soaking wet, and the brassica root was down 18, 20 inches in the soil. That's a vessel for nutrients moving up and down. It's not taking it away from your crop. It could be adding to your crop. So the more research we try to do, the more we try to quantify these data points. But we have never seen, now, there's always that one time where we've had an issue where it took away from the yield. It was usually, and I don't want to blame anybody, but a management practice that didn't go right because of maybe somebody else's error. And then we could talk about that later. But we have seen once in a while where it did take a little hit on the crop. Most of the time, 99% of the time, we see no hit on the crop. In fact, we see a better crop. And I think it's because of that armament to the ground, keeping the ground cooler, constantly putting the carbon in the soil. Deep roots are going down, bringing nutrients up. So it's a vessel for more nutrients to get into your current crop.
Kelly, the issue on fertility is one thing, but one thing that we didn't get into was the timing of the fertility. There's going to be someone that says, yeah, all right, maybe if I put in cover crops in October, I can see that being the thing. And I hear TJ's point, those tubers going down, breaking up the compaction is another benefit we didn't talk about. A tuber going down 18 inches busts up compaction, right?
Yep.
But what about, is it too early? Might you run the risk of grabbing fertility, putting them in June that was meant for the crop? In other words, it's not competitive at a certain point, but it might be competitive because you're going in at a real important stage for the corn plant, V3, V4, something like that.
Well, that goes back to what TJ was talking about, though, about the selection of the plants. And the brassicas, things like that, won't hold the same nutrition that the corn is chasing. And they will collaborate. They will collaborate, not compete. Pardon me.
Okay. TJ, water retention. Most everybody knows that somewhere between June and August, we get hot and dry in the upper Midwest and the eastern corn belt where I am. It happens, right? So water is going to be a concern because somebody's going to say, man, that just came in. Those plants started taking off right exactly when my corn needed to water, and now it was competitive. I even have a hard time getting around that. Am I teach me why I'm wrong?
So It can happen. So don't get me wrong. This can happen. So part of the reason this all works, Damian, is as that crop is growing, it starts canopy over the top of these brassicas and the annual ryegrass, and it slows their development and growth. The beauty of it is with that armament on top of the soil, you're keeping the ground cooler. So as long as you keep the ground below 100 degrees or 104 degrees, you're not respirating water out of the soil and you're not respirating water out of your crop. You're keeping it cooler. With these cover crops, with the armament of the overwintering cover crop and the next year growing, we found that soil staying under 100 degrees at the surface, which means you're not respirating that out. So you're not losing water by evaporation. You're holding more water in. With the deep roots going down in the soil, say they get down 9-10 inches before they really cover over, they're down in a moisture that you're not tapping into with your corn roots yet, and they're tapping into it, bringing it up for you. Plus all those little holes that they're creating, all these little funnels and tubers, you get a little rain and it goes in the soil, not over the top. So that aggregation of the soil is really huge too. So the longer you do this, the more water retention you actually have. So when you get that time, you get that 4-inch rain quick, and it goes in and stays. Yeah. Now you got this big sponge that's holding it so it doesn't go anywhere. And these plants are just sitting there kind of using it, working it back and forth with each other. The biggest part of it is the correct selection of the plants. Okay, you use something that's a summer crop, yes, you could take away from your crop.
Okay, that's why we need an expert like you on selection of plants. What about population, Kelly? There's going to be, I mean, is it going to look like a carpet, or is it going to look like am I still going to see bare soil in between the rows of corn?
I hope not. That will depend upon the germination. That's a little challenging for us in the hills where we're going to use the drone. TJ in Minnesota with the flat, straight back and forth, they actually drill this in when they're wide dropping. And that looks great. You know, the pictures TJ has sent me, it does look like a carpet. I hope that when we put them out there in June, and it still typically will get some rains here in Western Iowa, I hope it looks like a carpet.
So you want it to be so that you can't see bare soil in between the rows of corn.
Absolutely. Yep. That gets back to the armor he's talking about.
Okay. I mean, okay. So by the way, do you have imagery the way you do it in the flat ground, TJ, with a wide drop that actually has a drill component to do the seeding? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you want to see how this is done, TJ's going to send me that, and then we're going to have Will, our producer, drop in this video or this picture so you can see it, so you can appreciate it. Kelly can't do that because he's got fields that have curve and hill, so you're going to do it with a drone. This seems like a real big challenge because capacity. I mean, a drill can be great big. You can put all kinds of seed on it. A drone can carry, 30 or 40 pounds. How's this going to work?
How's it going to work? Drone or the drill?
Drone.
The drone, you know, we can. I believe it holds 8 gallons. It'll hold 80 pounds of seed, and Windgrove will go out there and cover crop it. We do some spraying and some different research with our drone. We actually did seed some cover crops with our drone last year. Works very well. We just didn't do it till late August. This year we're going to move it ahead 60 days, hopefully 70 days. We'll just have to see. Depends on the weather program.
If you keep up with our stuff, go and look at the footage from last summer when I was at Kelly's farm and I did a video demonstrating how drones work. And Windgrove, his guy Mike Windgrove, was on the flatbed trailer with all the gear you need, and it's really educational, informative stuff. With that in mind, why don't you tell me? Do you need to put liquid in there to get the dispersion? So is it liquefied seed or is it blowing out as dry seed?
It'll just blow out dry seed. With the drone, we won't have to because you won't try to spread that big of a pattern. If, this first year, we won't try to do every acre we farm or anything like that. This first year will be experimental, things like that. We'll pick out some fields that this would really benefit from that we can put the cattle in. Going forward, if we want to try to do this on every acre and the drone becomes a challenge, a narrow-wheeled spreader, a narrow-wheeled machine like our sprayer with a dry spreader box on it, we could go out and spread it. At that point, you would maybe want to put some ammonium sulfate or something with it if you're trying to spread, a 50 or 60 foot pattern. But that would be the way to do that then, and just have the sprayer, pardon me, it wouldn't be a sprayer, the dry spreader box drive across the field. If maybe we'll have to get to that point to get to the volume of acres we need, but we're going to start with the drone.
Okay. So by the way, you're not going to do every acre. Are you going to do 1/4 of your acres?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
TJ, the person that's then saying, okay, I don't know if that'll work. drone, maybe they don't have access to it or whatever. How do you encourage people to do this, to put it in earlier like this, not waiting until after the harvest? You've got the method that you do, and then the drone. What are my options?
So we got multiple ways of doing it, Damian. That's a great question. So when we started out,
I ask great questions, TJ. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay,
I can tell you've done this for a day or two.
Hey, not just done it. There's people that have done stuff crappy for a long time. I've done it well. I mean, let's just face it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I can see that. That's perfect. So we started out with a John Deere Gator with a pendulum spreader in the back that held about 800 pounds. And we just went up and down the corn row and spread it. It spread about 20-foot pattern, 25-foot pattern. So we just went back and forth in where our planter tractor went and spread about 30 feet. And we just spread it that way, and we got it on top of the ground and worked. Then we built a seeder to do the same thing. Then I had a customer built a high clearance Hagie machine with a box from Fennings out in Ohio that had drop nozzles on it to get it down below the surface. Then there was some other units.
Because once a crop gets a certain level, your seed, if it's very lightweight, might just hang on the corn leaves and not get down to ever get soil. Because that seed to soil contact seems like that's going to be, when you're broadcasting it, first off, you're going to have the actual corn plant that's going to prevent it from getting to the soil until it rains, which could be, a week or whatever. But the other one is getting seed to soil contact. Broadcasting, you have certain seed that doesn't germinate because it doesn't actually get placed into the soil.
Right. So all the seeds we pick will work fine with broadcasting. You can throw them on top of the ground, they'll work. So annual ryegrass is like grass seed for your lawn. So you take that out in the spring, and just go blow it on top, and you get a rain on and germinates. Nebraskas are the same way. They're very easily spread on top and germinated. The holdbacks of top application are two things. Number one is when your predators level and beneficial levels of bugs get very high, They eat this seed and they don't eat all of it. That's what makes me mad. If they'd eat the whole damn thing, I wouldn't have to go defend anything. But they eat a little hole in the side of the brassica, and they eat the tip off the end of the annual ryegrass, and it doesn't germinate. Mm-hmm. So as we go farther in this, we have to talk to guys about, okay, you can start here, but you might have to get to this level. And that's when we start talking about light rolling baskets between the rows, drag chains on side dress machines, dragging, tumbling it in, just to get some lightly seed to soil contact. That's where this Hinneker unit that we're putting together places it in the soil for us with these two rows. So as we go forward, sometimes we have to make adjustments. But to start with, blowing it on top in a high no-till system with a lot of residue, what we found out is it gets on top of the soil surface or the residue surface. When you flip that open in the morning, there's all this moisture that's accumulated around that residue. That's enough to get it to germinate and grow.
Kelly, there's going to be somebody that's saying, and I always try to act like the devil's advocate because I know that some of our listeners are going to be, especially on this topic, because we've been hearing about cover crops for a long time. There's still like less than 10% of acres, less than 10% of cultivated acres, TJ, you probably have the numbers, are cover cropped. And, I read Gabe's book a long time ago, and I said, this is where we should go. And I have people that fight with me that won't work here, whatever. One of the other ones is going to be, in trying to get this out there, unless you do use a drone or fly it on, I'm going to knock down my crop. That's going to be a question or a criticism of this.
Well, I want to drive through the crop as little as possible. However, at the early stage that we hope to put these on, and with a narrow, if we do go with the narrow wheeled dry spreader, at that stage, I do believe the corn will come back, most of it, and I still think that the juice was worth the squeeze. I still think the ROI is there. So if I need to go out there with that spreader, I'm perfectly happy with it.
Do you change it? By the way, you've been big on, TJ, ryegrass, not cereal rye, and brassicas. You just like saying the word brassica. I can tell you've said it a lot, which you could say turnips and radishes, right? That's really when we talk about brassicas, that's what we're talking about.
Right. So I use our turnips and I use our Bayou kale. And the reason I use kale over turnips or over radishes is it's a higher seed count, takes the shading better, has a way superior taproot than a radish does. It lives at 14 degrees for 20 hours in the fall. So in our world, sometimes that's the middle of December before it's actually terminating out. Yeah. So you figure if you planted that, say June 15th, and it grew from then till it kind of went dormant for the summer, and then it took off again when the crop opened up. You can drive a kale plant down, a turnip plant down, a cabbage plant down. You can snap them down, they'll pop back up. The radishes, the tuber sticks out of the ground, you snap it off, it's done. So I use radishes in the right sequence. In the interseeding, it's not the right sequence. So Nebraska, the three I use is Bayou kale, African cabbage, and purple top turnips are the three I like to use.
What kind of kale you're calling it? Bio what?
Bayou kale.
Bayou, meaning like the Cajuns in Louisiana. Okay.
Yep. But we get it from
when you harvest this, Kelly, you're driving a combine that's got tires that are as big as my wingspan, and you've got these grain carts that have 1,000 bushels in them. You're smashing this stuff down. What's really going to be there after harvest? Half of it, or will it live through the smash down?
A lot of it will live through the smash down. Number one. Number two, we'll drive on less than half. You've got a 12-row corn head out there, and going back and forth, and the grain cart doesn't drive anywhere. I would say you're going to drive down a fourth to a third of it.
And then a part of that comes back because...
And part of that's going to come back. You're going to drive down a fourth to a third of it, and half of that's going to go back.
How big will this crop be? What will the height of this look like in October when the combines run through this cornfield, TJ?
It could be anywhere from ankle high to knee high.
Okay.
And then you drive it down. So it's like, we go back to your lawn. You drive your lawn down with a grain cart and tractor and semis, and you about pound your grass to nothing, and it's brown. You think it's dead, and 10 days later you're mowing it because it all grew back. This is the same style grass is what's in your lawn. It's a bunch grass. It's a more of a grass versus a cereal. Cereals, if you drive them down enough, you'll break them off. You'll snap the crowns off and kill them. Annual ryegrass, you won't do that. So our bounty is a really superior ryegrass to overwintering also. So I've had this stuff over winter 9 out of 10 years. So come spring, it's there again. You could graze it in the spring, plant corn into it, terminate it out. It is not as aggressive growing in the spring, so it's easier to control in front of corn.
The person that wants to do this, what do they need to know that we didn't cover, TJ? You're the expert.
Chemicals we need, and I'm not a chemical expert, but there are very good guides that I utilize. As one was done by Penn State. And it's what I used, and I know it wasn't done here in the Midwest. I get yelled up at this all the time. They did it at Penn State out east. Yes, they did. But it is a guide to look at, because we know when we've tried this with the wrong herbicides and the wrong carryover herbicides, we have dinged this crop bad, this cover crop, what we tried to do. So I go through that. It's called Improved Cover Crop Seeding Penn State, and it shows you a guide of ingredients and then trade names and likely injury, possible injury, unlikely injury. So there is a gamut of chemicals we can still utilize. The other part we see is once we get this covered, this started in the summer, we do not see the weed pressure come back. And I really believe it's that holistic state of, as the ground's covered and armored, we just don't get weeds coming.
That's what I was just going to say, Kelly. By if you're putting this in, say, mid-June, you could have already done your herbicide pass maybe a week or two before that. And if it's a herbicide that doesn't have much residual, you're probably out of the woods on this anyway, because then if this takes off like it's supposed to, gets a little bit of moisture or whatever, it crowds out the weed. So do you see herbicide being the big of a challenge?
No, I don't. Windgrove and TJ are connected here, and they're working on what seeds TJ is going to select and what chemicals Windgrove is going to connect to be able to put this crop in as early as possible. But it is a concern, and we are paying attention to it, but we're trying to build both programs to work together.
Is there a danger, TJ, in putting it in too early? In other words, planting your cover crop almost right behind the corn planter? That seems like it might be a competitive situation.
Yeah, so this year I had a couple growers in Wisconsin that got their corn in a little bit later due to, we were wet. And then they went and V2, V3 seeded their corn or cover crop, and their corn is a little slower development because of the weather, and it got ahead of it. Now, I did hear back from both of them. Come fall, when the combine rolled, they're pretty nervous. They combined, they said it was great corn. It did not hurt the corn. It just looked really bad to start with, and it was pretty scary looking.
You mentioned Wisconsin. Is there an application, like would a dairy farmer be able to wait a month after the combine shells off the corn, get some growth on that cover crop, and then mow it and green chop it? Is there any value there, or does that not work?
Yep. So annual ryegrass is terrific forage protein. The kale and the cabbage and turnips are huge in micronutrients: copper, sulfur, boron, manganese, and zinc. So it's a full package of what you're getting. So say you could get that cover crop up to 14 inches, 16 inches in the fall, possibly do the right, got your chopping done early. you could get a ton and a half of feed off that. There'd be really some high quality feed.
Right. But unfortunately, you can't do it all. You there's no way to do it. You can't chop it with the corn because there's not a head to do such a thing.
That Kelper head that they run on most of those choppers would pull if the kale was big enough. You'd pull that kale in with the chopper. And like I said, kale is high in micronutrients. And so it's helping your cattle in the ruminant because of micronutrients. And that's what we feed so much rock to a dairy to get the micronutrients, and you're feeding in an organic form.
TJ, I try to, every time I have Kelly on, talk about dairy farming because he's pretty anti-dairy farming. He picks on me for my dairy farming background. He says that I'm skinny because I grew up eating Holstein steers. So I try to make sure that I talk to people like you that are pro-dairy. I feel like maybe you and I kind of can bond and take this hostility that he has toward dairy farmers like me.
Just take it away. Yeah, I mean, I got to work with everybody. So I'm a fan of all these guys, but I grew up in dairy, and then we went to feeding steers, and we fed dairy steers for a long time. Oh. The way we made it work was we took our beef herd and crossed them into those dairy steers, so they look like Angus cattle, but they weren't. So that was that marketing move of you think you're buying Angus, and it was a Hereford Holstein cross. Great meat. So I grew up eating that towards the end, and it's like that's why I'm the size I am.
You were beef on dairy before it was a thing. It's a big, huge part of the business right now. All right, Kelly, last couple of thoughts here. Does this change anything else about your cropping system?
No, it doesn't.
You don't have to change. You don't have to forego fungicide. If you think you have a fungus problem, can you still put fungicide on this corn? And then does it harm that cover crop? No.
Yep. No, that's fine. It won't change anything else. We were altering our chemical program anyway because of some of the different things we want to do. And now we're just making sure it all works together. I actually, again, with the weed suppression, I think this will support the chemical program. But no, this doesn't change anything else.
And so, like Wingrove's out there doing stuff, if you need to do a treatment in whatever late season, doesn't change anything.
Nope.
Got it. TJ, last thought. You obviously are wanting people to do more of this. We should be doing more of this. You already said, you even admitted there's been a couple of problems. You corrected that. Some insect problems. You talked about going in too early with it. What else do I need to know? Closing thought on doing cover crops into corn early seeding.
So one thing I really talk about all the time is make sure you get your application right. So if you're going to go bulk spread, like with fertilizer, say you go to a local co-op and say, hey, can you spread this for me? Annual ryegrass will not fly as far as fertilizer. So we'll tell guys you're going to be down to 25-foot spread patterns. So with the high clearance machines, we're going to be down. The Nebraskas will fly the same distance as the fertilizer, but the ryegrass won't. So we don't want streaks of this. So as we start doing this, the part of communication is huge. The part of education is huge. Make a lot of phone calls. I tell everybody, I'm on duty from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. My phone's on. Kelly knows this. Text me, call me. I'll respond to this stuff and try to walk you through it. I don't want anybody to have any more problems than we've already had. We've already experienced them. You don't have to go through it again. I've goofed up enough in my life. Just learn from what I've done wrong and just don't have to do those things. So
part of one of the whole big things with XtremeAg, we make the mistakes so you don't have to.
Right.
Last question. How much am I spending?
$18 to $22 an acre, depending on how strong your mix is. I tell everybody, I'm still in the back of my mind, the farmer hat's on backwards. So in the back of my mind, I always say, do I believe this BS this guy's shoveling me? And what would I pay for it? I always say any kind of cover crop mix between $15 and $22 an acre is benefit to us for the carbon and all the great attributes to it. And I believe that's a cost we can absorb in ag really easy. You start getting these mixes up to 20, 25, 30, 40, $50 an acre, there better be a reason. So in Kelly's case, we did some of those high dollar mixes on his regenerative part with the cattle. That was a different conversation. Cover crop and row crop, $15 to $22 an acre needs to be your cost on it.
And that includes the application? That does not include the application?
That's just seed.
Okay. So another, what's reasonable per acre on application? Another 5 to 7?
Yeah. So what we're going to do with this Y drop is we're going to charge $20 an acre for the Y drop because we're doing two things. We're doing Y drop application and cover crop seeding. So we're going to charge $20 to our growers. Our local SWCDs have actually put some money away for just the application portion. So the grower won't have to pay that part of it. So there's a lot of these government things out here that you can tailor make to that.
Yep.
So we've actually tailor made some RCPP program dollars for that. But we always look at it as that's about our cost. if this works out and the machine gets bigger and we can make it work better, we could cut the rates down. But right now we're doing 2 applications for you.
What do you amortize a drone per acre at, Kelly? Is that, you call that a $5 per acre, 7?
No, I think the drone is more like $14, $15 an acre.
Okay.
Dry.
So 14, 15 bucks and there are 20 on seeds. You're probably 35 bucks an acre on this, but you don't think there's any question about the payback?
No, I don't. I sure don't think there is. And, we won't know until we see what sort of germination we get and things like that. But no, I don't. We're already doing this, Damian, and we're just doing it at the end of August. All we're going to do is move this ahead 60, 70 days and get even a bigger bang for our buck out of it.
June 26th is a field day. I'm looking at my calendar. June 26th is a field day at Garrett Land and Cattle. I'm going to be there. You are invited to be there, and we will, by then, there'll be acres that probably have been planted for a couple weeks.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, so we can probably go and look at some fields that have, maybe that's something we should do, is make sure we have on the tour a field that's got 2 weeks in or so, maybe even 3 weeks in of cover crop over droned into corn ground.
It would be pretty cool to see some growth on June 26th. Maybe we'll get some out there, like you say, 2 weeks ahead of time. That would be exciting.
TJ, you going to be at this field day? I'd like you to be there.
Absolutely.
I feel like dairy farmers like you and I going into the lion's den of hostility the way Kelly is, picking on us Holstein eaters, I think that we need to probably team up.
Yeah, I think we got to hang together. That black and white color goes a long ways. And the big thing is the school line, the mascot here at Blooming Prairie is black and white. That's our color. So it just fits into the whole scenario.
His name's TJ Kartes. If I want to learn more about the seed that you guys offer at Saddle Butte Ag, I just pulled up on my phone, but the website is?
Biotil Cover Crops.
And you can go to saddlebutte.com. Can I not? That's it right there?
Yep, that's us. That's the guy.
Saddlebutte.com. His name's TJ Kartes. Thanks for being on here. The other guy is Kelly Garrett. Tremendous amount of learning. Come to our field days. We have field days scheduled now for all of XtremeAg. We're going to be at all the guys' farms, and Kelly's on June 26th. So stay tuned for all that. Till next time, thanks for being here. Kelly Garrett, TJ Kartes. I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation.